Alert. In the last 72 hours, $2 trillion has vanished from the U.S. banking system. 7 major banks are now on the brink of collapse, and the government is staying completely silent. What they're not telling you could wipe out your savings overnight. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which banks are in danger, why this is happening, and most importantly, what you need to do right now to protect your money. Stay with me, because this information could save your financial future. March 2025. While you're scrolling through social media, while mainstream news talks about celebrity gossip and political drama, a financial earthquake is happening right beneath our feet. Let me give you the facts, cold hard facts that Wall Street doesn't want you to know. Bank of America. Stock down 23% in just 10 days. That's not a correction. That's a free fall. Wells Fargo, receiving emergency liquidity. Injections from the Federal Reserve. Emergency. Let that word sink in. PacWest. Deposit withdrawals hitting $15 billion. People are pulling their money out in panic. First Republic. Trading halted not once, but twice this week. When trading gets halted, that's the stock market's way of saying, we need to stop the bleeding. Charles Schwab. Unrealized losses exceeding $30 billion. $30 billion. Signature Bank, the FDIC is already in backdoor talks. You know what that means? They're preparing for failure. And Silvergate. Crypto exposure triggering complete panic among investors. The question isn't if these banks fail. It's when. So what triggered this $2 trillion meltdown? What's really going on here? 3 words. Commercial, real estate. Let me explain this in a way that makes sense. Since 2020, since the pandemic changed everything, office buildings across America have lost 40% of their value. 40%. Think about that. A building worth $10 million in 2019 is now worth $6 million. Why? Because people aren't going back to offices. Remote work became permanent. Companies downsized. Tech companies laid off hundreds of thousands of workers. Buildings that were once packed with employees now sit empty. And who owns these buildings? Who gave out massive loans against these properties? Banks, these 7 banks we're talking about. They're sitting on billions, tens of billions in worthless assets. Assets they valued at 100% that are now worth 60%. That's a gap that can sink entire financial institutions. But here's the part that should make your blood boil. The Federal Reserve knew this was coming. Internal documents that were leaked. Just last week show warnings dating back to November 2024. Federal Reserve officials, the same people who are supposed to protect our economy, saw this crisis forming. And what did they do? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. They stayed silent. They didn't warn the public. They didn't force banks to shore up their reserves. They just watched and waited. Now let me tell you something even more disturbing. Your deposits. The money you worked hard for. The money sitting in your checking and savings account. It's only insured up to $250,000. The FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, will cover you up to that amount. But if you have more than $250,000 in any of these 7 banks, you could lose everything above that amount when they collapse. Everything. Now let me walk you through what's about to happen. The domino effect that could crash the entire American banking system. Stage 1. These 7 banks collapse. Maybe not all at once. Maybe one goes first. Maybe it's this week. Maybe it's next month. But when the first one falls, watch what happens. Stage 2. Panic spreads to over 50 regional banks. Investors panic. Depositors panic. Everyone starts asking, is my bank next? Stage 3. Mass withdrawal runs. Just like 1929. You've seen the old black and white photos, right? Lines around the block. People desperate to get their cash out before the bank shuts down. That's not ancient history. That could be next month. Stage 4. The FDIC fund runs completely dry. Right now, the FDIC has $128 billion to cover all bank failures in America. Sounds like a lot, right? Wrong. If these 7 banks fail, we're talking about liabilities exceeding $500 billion. The FDIC fund won't even cover a quarter of that. Stage 5. Government bailout using your tax money. Remember 2008? The Great Financial Crisis? We bailed out banks with $700 billion of taxpayer money. This time, experts are estimating $3 to $5 trillion will be needed. Let me break that down for you. $3 to $5 trillion divided across American households. That's $40,000 per household. $40,000 that you'll pay through higher taxes, inflation, reduced government services, or all of the above. And here's the kicker. In 2008, most of those banks paid back the bailout money eventually. This time, with commercial real estate values destroyed, many experts believe these banks will never recover. You'll be paying for this for decades. Now, don't just take my word for it. Let's look at what the smartest money in America is doing right now. Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha, the most successful investor in American history. In the fourth quarter of 2024, he sold 80% of his bank stocks. 80%. This is a man who built his fortune on the phrase, be greedy when others are fearful. But when it comes to banks right now, he's running for the exits. Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan Chase, the largest bank in America. He publicly stated, and I quote, "The worst is yet to come for regional banks." Think about that. The CEO of the biggest bank in the country is warning people about other banks. When was the last time you heard that? Michael Burry, remember him? The guy who predicted the 2008 housing crisis? The guy they made a movie about? The Big Short? He just bet $2 billion against the banking sector. $2 billion betting that banks will fail. Sheila Bair, former FDIC chair, the woman who was in charge during the 2008 crisis. She knows bank failures better than almost anyone alive. She called this situation, and I quote, a slow-motion train wreck. Slow motion, meaning we can see it coming, but no one's stopping it. Ray Dalio, founder of Bridgewater Associates, the world's largest hedge fund. He's been moving money out of traditional banks and into hard assets. Gold, real estate, commodities. These are the billionaires. The people with armies of analysts, inside connections, access to information you and I will never see. And they're all doing the same thing. Getting out of banks. Shouldn't you be paying attention? Let me tell you what's even more revealing. These billionaires aren't just moving their own money. They're moving their company's money, their foundation's money, their family's trusts. When the smart money moves, it's not a suggestion. It's a warning. All right, enough doom and gloom. Let's talk about solutions. Let's talk about what you can do right now, today, to protect yourself and your family. Step 1. Check if your bank is on the danger list. The 7 banks I mentioned are the most critical, but there are over 30 other banks showing similar warning signs. Go online right now and search for bank safety ratings. Websites like Bauer Financial and Weiss Ratings provide free bank safety scores. If your bank has a rating below B, you need to take action immediately. Step 2. Spread your deposits across multiple banks. Remember, FDIC insurance only covers $250,000 per depositor, per bank. If you have $300,000, don't keep it all in one place. Open accounts at 2 or 3 different banks. Keep under $250,000 in each. Yes, it's more paperwork. Yes, it's inconvenient, but it's also safe. Step 3. Consider moving money to safer vehicles. Treasury bonds. These are backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government. Even if banks fail, the government won't. You can buy treasury bonds directly through treasurydirect.gov. Credit unions. These operate differently than banks. They're member-owned, which means they're not driven by the same profit pressures. Historically, credit unions have much lower failure rates than commercial banks. Money market funds. These invest in very safe short-term securities. They're not FDIC insured, but they're regulated differently and generally considered very safe. Physical assets. Gold has been a store of value for thousands of years. During bank crises, gold typically rises. You don't need to buy bars and bury them in your backyard. You can invest in gold ETFs, which are backed by physical gold but much easier to manage. Step 4. Have 3 to 6 months of cash accessible. Notice I said accessible, not in the bank. If banks start failing, there could be temporary freezes on accounts. ATM limits could be imposed. You might not be able to access your money for days or even weeks. Keep physical cash at home. Not your entire savings, but enough to cover rent, mortgage, food, utilities, and gas for 3 to 6 months. I know what you're thinking. Cash at home? What if someone breaks in? Get a small home safe. They cost $200 to $500. It's the best insurance you can buy. Step 5. Monitor these banks daily. When the collapse starts, and I believe it will, you'll have hours, not days to act. Set up Google alerts for these 7 bank names. Check financial news every morning. Follow financial analysts on social media. The moment you see a major bank's stock drop more than 20% in a single day, that's your signal. Move your money immediately. Now let me tell you something that's going to make you angry. Really angry? Why isn't this on CNN? Why isn't MSNBC covering this 24/7? Where's Fox News? I'll tell you exactly why. Money. These banks are the largest advertisers on television. In 2024 alone, these 7 banks spent $1.2 billion on TV advertising. $1.2 billion. You think CNN is going to run a story about Bank of America collapsing while Bank of America is paying them $50 million a year in advertising? You think MSNBC is going to warn you about Wells Fargo when Wells Fargo sponsors half their programming? It's not a conspiracy. It's just business. The mainstream media is not your friend. They're not looking out for you. They're looking out for their shareholders and their advertisers. And it's not just TV news. Go look at the major financial newspapers. The Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, Bloomberg. You'll see small articles buried on page 12. Regional banks face headwinds. Commercial real estate concerns grow. headwinds, concerns. These are soft words designed not to panic anyone. But behind closed doors, these same journalists are moving their own money. They know what's coming. There's also political pressure. The current administration doesn't want a banking crisis on their watch. It's an election year coming up. Bank failures would devastate the economy, the stock market, unemployment. So there's enormous pressure on regulators, on the Federal Reserve, on the Treasury Department to keep things quiet, to manage the narrative, to use phrases like orderly resolution instead of bank failure. But you can't hide a $2 trillion problem forever. The truth always comes out. The question is, will you be ready when it does? Let me give you some historical context, because this isn't the first time America has faced a banking crisis. 1893. The Panic of 1893. Over 500 banks failed. Unemployment hit 25%. It took 4 years to recover. 1907. The Panic of 1907. Bank runs across the country. It got so bad that J.P. Morgan himself had to personally bail out banks using his own money. 1929 to 1933. The Great Depression. 9,000 banks failed. 9,000. Your grandparents or great-grandparents lived through this. They never trusted banks again. That's why the FDIC was created in 1933, to restore confidence in banking. 2008. The Great Financial Crisis. We were days away from complete collapse. ATMs almost stopped working. The entire financial system nearly froze. Ben Bernanke, the Federal Reserve Chairman at the time, later admitted in his memoir that we were 24 hours away from economic Armageddon. 24 hours. And here's what you need to understand. Every single one of these crises followed the same pattern. First, denial. Everything is fine. The fundamentals are strong. Second, small failures. 1 or 2 banks go under. Isolated incidents. Nothing to worry about. Third, contagion. Fear spreads. More banks fail. Fourth, panic. Bank runs. Market crashes. Fifth, government intervention. Bailouts. Emergency measures. We're currently between stage 2 and stage 3. Small banks have already failed. First Republic nearly collapsed last year and had to be rescued. Silvergate shut down. Silicon Valley Bank failed in 2023. Those were the warning shots. Now we're seeing the contagion spread to larger institutions. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And right now, it's rhyming with every major banking crisis of the past 150 years. So let me bring this all together. $2 trillion wiped out. 7 major banks on the brink of collapse. The Federal Reserve staying silent. Mainstream media covering it up. Billionaire investors running for the exits. This is not a drill. This is not fear-mongering. This is based on publicly available data, expert analysis, and historical patterns. You have a choice to make right now. Option 1. Ignore this information. Hope for the best. Keep all your money where it is and pray nothing happens. Option 2. Take action. Protect yourself. Spread your deposits. Move to safer assets. Have cash on hand. I can't make that choice for you, but I can tell you this.